Hey everyone! So a little while ago I left a poll on my channel for you guys to decide what you want me to do next. And as it turns out, what you want me to do next is exactly the same thing I always fucking do. And so without further ado, here's a review of a crappy movie game. Let it begin!
Let it begin!
Along with the likes of Meet the Robinsons, Bolt has become one of Disney's forgotten animated flicks, which is a surprise considering I actually felt as though it was majorly overhyped at the time.
What did you say?
I also think it's a real shame that it's been seemingly swept under the rug, considering it's not a bad movie in my opinion.
This is awesome!
The movie stars John Travolta as the K9 TV star, who goes missing in search of his owner Penny, whom he believes is in danger. As usual, it was accompanied by a tie-in video game. As this was released on both PS2 and PS3, I'll be using clips from both, as I usually do. The PS2 clips will be represented by this symbol, while the PS3 clips will be represented by this one.
Get it? Got it? Good.
I'll get my ball.
Jesus fucking Christ! That's gonna haunt my nightmares for weeks!
What did they do to you, boy? What did they do?
He looks frigging traumatized. This dude has seen things. Terrible things.
Perhaps himself in the mirror.
The PS3 model doesn't look much better. The biggest difference is his tail, which is bizarrely wagging much more frantically. Really, if he wags that thing any faster, he'll take off. Anyway, in spite of the nightmare fuel, I actually like the presentation of this game. You see, the game doesn't follow the plot of the movie, but instead plays out like the show, as Penny and Bolt try to track down Penny's father, who has been taken by the evil Calico, intent on forcing him to build a weapon for his master plan.
Seems I overestimated you.
Where's my dad?
Now, I actually like the idea of this, and it's a pretty logical move. While I generally prefer a movie game to, adapt to the movie, doing this instead allows the developers more creative freedom, as it permits the use of Bolt's superpowers and also allows them to create a unique and gripping story.
I mean, they didn't, but they could have.
It also means they didn't have to pay for a voice actor for Bolt, which admittedly is probably their main reason for doing this. Bolt doesn't speak in this game, so I'm sorry to those of you who wanted to see me play as John Travolta.
Yeah, that's really, really super.
And the way it's presented by having Rhino the hamster binge-watch the Bolt TV show is a neat idea.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
Not only is this a smart framing device utilizing the standout character from the movie, but since this little guy is basically voiced by a storyboard artist, the voice actor was quite possibly the cheapest to hire, so this likely worked in a developer's favor too.
Everybody wins!
The first level takes place in Italy, for some reason, and sees us take control of Penny in an incredibly basic stealth level. Conceptually, Penny's levels are quite interesting in my opinion, but the problem is that they're simply too easy, even for a kid's game. Penny performs her moves using a wheel bar. With it, she can not only perform stealthy attacks, but she can also activate special devices and use it to scale certain walls and buildings via narrow alcoves in the architecture. And this goes for ancient jungle temples and modern day buildings around the world. It sure is lucky that these gaps in the architecture are so conveniently universal. I did think that a wheel bar might be able to transform into Penny's scooter, as seen in the movie. After all, the scooter is depicted on the reverse of the game cover. But if you look closely, the fine print also specifies scooter not in game.
Then why, pray tell, did you put it there? You morons!
This is similar to the cover for the Meet the Robinsons game, as some members of the family are included on the front cover, only to have to include a disclaimer stating that not all of the characters feature. Evidently, there's just no care invested in the package design of these later PS2 games.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
Anyway, despite the lack of a scooter, the wheel bar is genuinely one of the most interesting aspects of the game, even if it is just a bar with wheels on it. For one thing, it deals a surprisingly hefty blow, as you can take out enemies in just one hit.
You might say she's the wheel deal.
With something called Enhanced Vision, you can press triangle to view where you can use your wheel bar, which is a nice idea and pretty necessary at times, as it's not always explicitly clear how to progress without this feature. Oh, and you can also throw mines at enemies from a distance, which is ultimately pointless considering how easy the combat is. I genuinely only used this once, and it was literally when the game told me to. After that, I done plumb forgot about it. Eventually, we stumble upon the bad guys' hideout, where they happen to be discussing their top secret plans very loudly.
Why keep the professor alive if he refuses to cooperate?
Because he's the only person who can finish the weapon's installation.
But don't tell anyone.
Gotcha! It's the girl!
We then switch to Bolt, whose gameplay predominantly revolves around fighting, and lots of it, which wouldn't be a problem if it wasn't so repetitive. You can perform a dash attack with the square button and a strong attack with triangle. You can also grab enemies with the circle button. When you do this, you then have to select either of the 4 prompts to perform a finishing move. The X button makes Bolt perform something called a pile drive move, the square button makes him slam an enemy, the circle button makes him toss an enemy away, and the triangle button makes him throw the enemy. Whenever an enemy's health is low, a circle button prompt appears above them, encouraging you to grab their face like the face-hugging alien freak you are.
It's eating my face!
Real talk, I think I'd be more terrified of this thing launching at my face than an actual face hugger. I'm not kidding!
It often then seems to prompt you to press the triangle button for a finishing move. But I really don't get why when any of the buttons get the job done. In fact, after playing the game for some time, I concluded that I preferred pressing any button other than the triangle button, as this move is so fucking slow. This slowness seems to be more of an issue with the PS2 game. I get that they wanted to make it look cool with a Matrix-style slow motion effect, but this would only be worth it if they showed you something worth watching in slow motion. Really, what am I looking at? And why is it taking so long? And did they have to play the move in slow motion every frigging time?
The boring fighting goes on for long enough without having to watch it in slow motion.
Where's my dad?
Shortly after this, we discover Penny's father is being held captive in Belize, for some reason. And suddenly we're there. That was fast. No idea how we got here. I can only assume Bolt's frantic tail wagging was put to use and we wiggle puppied our way over here. Anyway, here Penny has to use her wheel bar to raise the temple, and Bolt has to make his way inside while taking out all the bad guys.
Bring it on, you mangy mutt!
The game isn't advanced enough to let you switch characters, it merely progresses linearly, alternating between Penny levels and Bolt levels. Both characters have a double jump, and Bolt can use his dash attack in the air to cover more ground. This can also be used as a kind of triple jump. Bolt has some special moves too. These include the Super Bark, Super Speed, a ground pound move, and Laser Eyes, all of which increase in power whenever the plot calls for it. These special moves can only be used if you have enough power in your power meter, which can be increased by collecting the energy capsules deposited by fallen enemies, or from random vending machines you find throughout the game. Green capsules fill your power meter, while reddish-orange ones fill your health meter. You also find upgrades lying around, and collecting 9 of each colour will increase the health and power meters respectively. I find the colours here kind of unusual. I mean, green is often associated with health, and red and orange are most often associated with danger and destruction, so I figured it would have made more sense to swap the colours of the meters. This isn't really a criticism, I just find it kind of unusual from a logical design perspective. While fighting, this supercharge meter will also gradually fill, and once it has filled completely, you can activate Bolt's supercharged mode, which temporarily makes Bolt's special abilities ultra powerful. Oh, and I kinda like the noise it makes when it runs out. It just sounds so disappointed.
Damn.
Penny's part is just as tedious. You can sneak up behind an enemy by holding R1, and take them out in one hit by tapping the square button. This tactic would be much more effective if getting caught actually had consequences. If an enemy spots you, you simply have to tap a single button to evade capture and defeat them. Meaning it really doesn't make much difference whether the enemy sees you or not. Taking the enemies out stealthily, however, does reward you with power capsules. Penny's power meter also permits her the use of a limited but surprisingly generous invisibility power.
Yes, you heard me. You can turn invisible. Just in case you found the stealth too challenging.
Invisibility in stealth games can be utilised well, but in this case they're incredibly lenient. I don't recall a single time my meter was running low and I risked being exposed. The meter even freezes while she performs her attacks. Like, come on, I know this is for kids, but this is just patronizingly easy. As a side note, I actually find it kind of funny that she sounds so gravelly.
Bolt, look out!
Really? How many packs has this 12-year-old been smoking? She's like Patsy and Selma level of gravelly.
Now and again, Penny will encounter a terminal,
Security breach initiated.
which, when activated, allows her to hack the database in order to progress further in the level. These sequences remind me of Bentley's hacking sequence in Sly Cooper, although you could also argue it's basically a 3D version of Asteroids. How advanced! You use the left analog stick to move around, and the right analog stick to fire in various directions to take out the virus protection.
Counter-intrusion programs are attacking.
You can collect power-ups such as triple shots, rapid shots, and health pickups, and occasionally you'll pick up a bomb. Activating one of these with the R2 button will detonate viruses in the vicinity.
More CIPs detected.
These hacking sequences aren't especially bad, but they are boring. Throughout the game, you also unlock mini-games that can be played in the main menu, and these are all hacking levels, some of which are ones you've already played in-game, and some that seem to be exclusive to the minigames menu.
Port open.
Regardless, they are all pretty much the same, and for me, they represent the most boring aspect of the game.
You might say they're all bark and no bite. Get it? As in computer bite? I show myself out.
Anyway, as Bolt, we need to explore the inside of the temple. Holding the R2 button makes Bolt go invulnerable, while jumping and pressing R2 makes him perform the ground pound. The invulnerability power is essential in this level, as you need to find a way to lower the pillars and then make your way to them before they rise again, remembering to turn invulnerable before the pillar hits the ceiling. On first time playing this though, they give you very little warning that you need to do this. Come on, how was I supposed to know that would happen? Oh, and I love this completely useless hint on one of the loading screens. Invulnerability makes Bolt invincible. Well, no shit.
That's kind of like saying invulnerability makes Bolt invulnerable. Thanks, I figured that out.
Before long, the temple caves in and Calico leaves, thinking Penny and Bolt have been crushed by the rubble.
As long as the professor believes she's alive, he'll do what is asked and finish the weapon.
Of course, if this were the case, this would mean the game would be over already.
You mean it's not? Doggone it.
Naturally, Penny uses this opportunity to track the bad guys down.
Stropole Railway, Northern Russia.
Russia? Oh, wow, okay. This game sure moves fast.
You might say we're rushing around. I'm on fire today, man.
Anyway, the next level sees us hitch a ride on a train in Russia, the objective being to make our way to the front of the train while taking out all the enemies, all of whom have truly terrible names. The enemy that throws exploding discs at you is named, wait for it, Disky.
Do you think this name was chosen by Calico, or is it just a lucky coincidence?
There's also an enemy that uses these prodding baton things to prod you from a distance. What's her name? Proddy. Now, that does sound kind of threatening, but not in a way the developers were hoping for. It sounds like the forgotten 8th dwarf, banished for sexual harassment.
Hello, I'm Proddy. I like to prod things.
If Disky hits you with a disc, it will stick to Bolt, and the only way to avoid the eventual explosion is by using the invulnerability power. The problem with this is that you cannot use this power while Bolt is already partway through one of his overly dramatic combat moves, meaning getting blown up can't always be helped. Many of the enemies block certain attacks, meaning only certain moves will work on certain enemies. It's not that hard to overcome this, but it's admirable that the game forces you to employ some kind of strategy, rather than purely button mashing. I also neglected to mention that when you throw the enemies, sometimes targets will appear, and you're prompted to select where you want to throw them, although I swear this doesn't work in the PS2 version. Regardless, it doesn't seem to amount to much anyway. It sometimes results in a cool looking finishing move, but it doesn't really add much to the gameplay. Meanwhile, Penny's platforming is pretty dismal, which really spoils the Penny levels. It doesn't really feel as though you're believably controlling her at all, as she just seems so flimsy and generic. The platforming is clumsy, and it doesn't feel like she has any weight to her, which makes it all the more surprising when she lands with a resounding thud. Like, what the hell, man? That does not sound healthy for a 12-year-old.
What the hell are you made of, pine? Jesus Christ, Penninocchio!
Eventually, we need to take out Disky in a boss level. With R2, Penny can use the wheel bar to catch the discs thrown at her, and then just has to throw them back with square. We're just fortunate he's stupid enough to keep throwing discs at us even though it's clearly not working.
This goes to show that good wins because evil is dumb.
With Disky discarded, Bolt then has to infiltrate the Russian base, and despite the urgency of the situation, I took a moment to appreciate Bolt's frantic tail wagging here, as it inadvertently seemed to fit the music.
Whoa, look at him go!
Penny eventually finds a hidden tunnel where she suspects the bad guys are holding her dad.
We can reach it if we stop the water by destroying these 4 generator things.
And this level is long, man. Destroying the generators is such a slow process, when every step of the way you need to take out a bunch of enemies. And every time they appear, they come crashing through the windows.
Guys, come on, the other window is already open. The landlord's gonna be so pissed.
It's also around this point we're introduced to the whipping enemy. Ugh, what's he called? Mr. Whippy?
Honestly, this level was such a chore, I think we deserve some ice cream.
This game feels decidedly unpolished. Like, there are areas that look accessible, but the characters will just freeze in one place. There are no visible barricades, just an invisible wall that makes the characters freeze in an awkward pose. And yet, in this generator level, I actually feel that there should be a barrier blocking your path. While I was in mid-combat, I was accidentally pushed into the elevator. Which obviously killed the tension.
Sorry fellas, I'll be down in a minute.
With the generators destroyed, Penny needs to resort to stealth again.
I think I better find a quieter way in.
Yes, it's once again time for stealth. So let's all be really quiet. Yes, well, I was never much good at stealth, but fortunately in this game, I don't have to be.
Another thing I noted is that there are moments in the PS2 game when there's no sound whatsoever. The music will just cut out now and again, and even the sound effects seem far too subdued. There's just no atmosphere at all.
Please, make a sound. Anything, I beg you. I'm starting to hear my own thoughts.
Anyway, before too long, Penny is spotted, which isn't really a surprise considering all the noise we've been making.
Hey!
So is she just gonna stand there?
Friendly reminder that you can turn invisible. You might want to try that.
This next part sees Bolt face a seemingly endless influx of bad guys. The only way to stop them is to drag these lorries to block the doors, which thankfully isn't too difficult as most of the enemies seem to just patiently wait for us. Awfully decent of you.
Oh, come on, now you're just letting me win.
Before long, we come face to face with... Oh no, not the fat guy!
This is gonna take a while, isn't it?
And yeah, this guy doesn't even need a weapon. He literally immobilizes you by rolling on top of you. You just crushed a dog, dude. What more incentive do you need to lose some weight? Jesus! A little while later, the pair encounters some bad guys slacking on the job. Interestingly, while the little shittle game menu music loops in the background, which is a nice touch.
And also a reminder that I could be playing a better game.
Have a taste of yo-yo.
Calipore shipment to Peitai, China Harbor. 5 days.
Penny then discovers there's something shady going on in China, but before they can investigate, they discover some weapons primed for launch.
I think we better stop these missiles.
As it turns out, this is all merely a trap, and Calico manages to apprehend Penny and secure her in a giant rocket.
This is Dad's satellite, not a warhead.
Give my best to Sputnik, dear.
This is a bit elaborate, isn't it? Guys, she's 12. If you're gonna try to kill her, there are easier ways. You just had to get Roly-Poly-Oly to sit on her. She'd have had no chance. In any case, I actually really like this level. It sees you control Bolt as you move around the rocket, finding a way to disable it, detach the warhead, and free Penny. I also like how Bolt's laser eyes are utilized here. Yes, it's the same standard press to corresponding buttons gameplay, but the way it's presented makes it seem really dramatic.
Good job, Bolt.
A penny saved is a penny earned.
Before long, we arrive at the harbour in China, where Penny thinks Calico is hiding something in his boat and decides to investigate. And you know what that means? Another boring stealth level.
I'm so tired.
You and me both, sister.
These levels are predominantly rather dark, and since they take place on a barge carrying a load of shipping containers, it's not the most scenic.
I can hardly contain my excitement.
Really, this could literally take place anywhere in the world. There's nothing to visually indicate that this is China. The only dead giveaway is the Oriental style music, which is actually pretty atmospheric and cool. Again though, the gameplay itself is just too simple to be engrossing. In fact, the stealth is easier than usual here. Not only can you turn invisible, but you can also operate a sniper gun to take out the bad guys before you encounter them.
I'm not sure why you would do this when you can turn invisible. But anyway...
Oh, and I really am questioning the competence of these bad guys. Something tells me they don't pose much of a threat.
Nothing going on here.
You sure about that, buddy? Because I'm pretty sure I just saw your friend get shot. I'd be a bit worried if this was an everyday occurrence.
I also find it odd that this is referred to as a non-lethal security system. It looks pretty lethal to me.
This ship is filled with warheads, Bolt.
Bolt then has to flood the boat by grappling with the pipes inside. And this has to be one of the most boring levels in the game. Worse, if you can believe it, than that generator level. Every time you destroy a pipe, the enemies also start flooding in, and this becomes very tiresome. Hold on guys, I'ma come in. Just let me push this door open with my face. The fighting is just too repetitive. What should be an action-driven, exciting level just winds up being drawn out and tedious.
What's this game called again?
Bolt! Bolt! Bolt!
Yeah, thanks.
I love that the bad guys are scaling the cranes with their bare hands here.
You guys never thought about using one of these things?
I call it a ladder.
Interestingly, Penny doesn't use ladders properly either. Like, this way is quicker, obviously, but also pretty unnecessary. Still, her methods might be unorthodox, but at least she can climb ladders, which is more than can be said for Audrey. Anyway, before long... Sorry, I mean, after a very, very, very long time, Bolt manages to sink the boat.
My ship! Get to the station! Go, go, go!
We then need to chase down Calico as he flees to the station. This level isn't too bad, and it's pretty cool using invulnerability to destroy the oncoming cars. The fighting is irritating as hell as usual though. Rather than use the finishing moves the game keeps encouraging you to use, sometimes it's quicker to just keep smashing the enemy's faces in.
Keep smashing!
In fact, in this case, it's easier to just ignore them altogether. Obviously, there are plenty of times when you need to defeat them to trigger certain events, but there are also occasions when fighting them isn't at all necessary. I got so pissed off with roly-poly-oly here that I just wound up fleeing like the cowardly canine I am. Later, bitches!
I decided to live up to my name and bolt for the exit, so to speak.
Anyway, eventually we make it to the train. Here we have to make our way to the front of the train while avoiding the firing turrets. This is incredibly reminiscent of the cannon range in Meet the Robinsons. Once you make it to the front of the train, you need to take out the helicopter. After avoiding the onslaught of missiles, you merely have to bark at the helicopter when it draws near. Although why it repeatedly draws near is a mystery considering the helicopter is more than capable of dealing damage from a distance.
Wasn't that kind of the point of the helicopter? You know, that it can fly?
I also marvel at the fact that none of this disruption has any impact on the train whatsoever.
Really, a leaf just has to touch the line in his country and all trains are cancelled. This is a damn good service.
Calico then makes his escape again, but not before Penny plants a tracker on his jet.
He won't get far with that Spidey tracer on him.
This eventually leads to Oceania, undoubtedly the most scenic location of the game, and the concept of a secret hideaway in an exotic setting gave me major Incredibles vibes. I am very certain they derived at least some inspiration from this. Anyway, eventually Bolt has his powers drained.
Bolt?
And the resulting shock gives Penny...
the hiccups!
Will she cure herself of this unforeseen affliction? Find out next week on...
The Crap Movie Game Adventure Hour! Sponsored by Canine Crunchies.
Canine Crunchies can't be beat, they may teach me less special treats.
Sorry, I got carried away there. Anyway.
The pair then wind up in captivity. It's at this moment that Penny figures out Calico's ultimate plan.
You might say the penny dropped.
You're using satellites with focusing mirrors to bounce that beam around the Earth and neutralize all the atomic weapons. All but yours.
I don't get it. I don't really care, but I don't get it. With Bolt drained of his powers and Penny's, bar with wheels on it confiscated, they have to find a way out of their own accord.
I, for one, can't wait to see how they get out of this one. Thrilling stuff. This absolutely met my expectations, you know. Granted, they weren't very high.
First, Bolt needs to maneuver the cage so that Penny can make her way out. Then, Penny needs to get the elevator working. And yes, this involves another horrible hacking level. This one genuinely pissed me off. At some point I screwed up and they repeatedly respawned me in the most awkward location. Without any power-ups, getting out of here was a challenge.
There's a firewall blocking me.
I could have restarted the whole mission, but after already progressing quite a way through it, I really didn't want to restart if I could help it. Shortly after this, we encounter a cliched laser grid.
Oh no, not again!
Yeah, how many times have we seen this now? But this game is so lazy that they don't even show the consequence of touching a laser. There are no blaring alarms and there's no damage dealt. It simply throws a mission failed screen at you and you have to try again. There are also some occasions when we have to locate a button to reduce the number of lasers so we can pass. These are located at the end of stealth sections, and since we're without our wheel bar, we can't turn invisible. So you'd think this would require a little more finesse than usual, but nope.
Oh, how foolish of me to think I should be stealthy in a stealth level.
Bolt, you're free. Go!
We briefly get a chance to play as Bolt without his powers, which is even more boring than usual. Before too long, however, we reach a part of the game where Bolt becomes permanently supercharged, which kind of renders his regular attacks pointless.
I know the saying his bark is worse than his bite, but this is literally true in this case.
This eventually culminates in a final fight with Calico, which is as dull and drawn out as you'd expect. His attacks are all the same, and the boss goes on for longer than necessary as he keeps recharging his health. Every time he does, the game gives you a checkpoint, so it's not especially hard, just very long and boring. Much like, well, the rest of the game, really.
I want my dad now.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that line doesn't sound as dramatic as you think it does. It literally sounds like you're throwing a tantrum.
Get us out of here!
Daddy?
Penny!
Daddy indeed.
Bolt! The missiles!
No, Bolt, don't let go.
Bolt! Fetch!
No, Bolt.
Penny, you have to stop them, or people will die.
Uh-huh. So anyway, I hear you're a single father.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. I was lost in your eyes.
I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me.
Anyway, here we have to disable all of the missiles in the time limit, and it's entirely possible to do so, but when playing this first time, they really don't give you much leeway. Honestly, I screwed up a few times. As a final level though, I kind of like this. It genuinely feels as though the whole world is at stake, and depends squarely on you. It's just a shame there's no moment of triumph when you win.
Get well soon.
There's a mildly amusing epilogue scene afterwards, but the whereabouts of Penny's dad is never revealed, and he's never rescued, which is kind of a bummer. Goodbye, father.
I love you, Daddy.
It's kind of implied that the series would continue, but Rhino, well, he falls asleep. Can't say I blame him though, really.
I feel you, buddy. That's relatable stuff.
Yeah, that's really, really super.
There's undoubtedly some potential here. The presentation is admirable, but the execution is lackluster. Penny's stealth levels have a great atmosphere to them, but they're all too alike and just too damn easy. Meanwhile, Bolt's levels are also incredibly repetitive, and the fighting gets old fast. It's not the worst game I've played, but it could do with some more variety. There are some good ideas here, but it mostly falls flat. It genuinely feels unfinished, and the lack of a proper conclusion makes it feel like such a waste of time. As usual though, I think the main issue is that this game's development was clearly rushed. Sure, it derives elements from other stealth games, but despite not being an entirely original experience, this could still be a lot better than it is.
Damn.
Ultimately, the game isn't as awesome as it could be. In fact, you might say it's a little rough.
He's the swellest kid, the swellest kid around.